So, hello and welcome back yet again to another evening with Mary Shelley and her creation of Frankenstein. Um, I really enjoyed the first little bit of this, and technically, we aren't even into chapter one. I realized I kind of mislabeled this because it the first chunk of this is just a series of letters, as you remember if you listened to the last bit, that is coming from a sailor to his sister. I guess that's just to kind of frame the thing and give us a little bit of what's going on, or maybe it's just to give us a little more insight into the character of this sailor who I don't remember from any of the movies, but then again, I don't think any of the movies really truly maybe like match the book. I kind of want to see Dominic Noble do a Lost in adaptation of this one. That'd be kind of nice. If anybody tag him and ask him to do an adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Unless he's already done it. I should go back and look through. I've seen most of his stuff, but probably not everything. Anyway, enough about other YouTubers. It is time to sit down though and read this. Also, sorry about the lighting. I realize it's making me look like I ate a cherry or maybe rolled around and became a cherry. I have the curtains drawn in this room and they happen to be red. And amazingly enough, right now the sun is actually shining. And so it's shining through the curtains and giving everything sort of a red cast, which looks lovely on everything except for my skin. I hope that when I'm done reading, the sun is still out because it's been several days since I've really gotten a chance to see it. But anyway. That is what it is. It is time, though, to sit down. We are going to finish the letters tonight, and then tomorrow we should be into the official chapter one. So, once again, let us jump back into Frankenstein, the Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley. Letter 3, July 17th, to Mrs. Saville, England. My dear sister, I write a few lines in haste to say that I am safe and well advanced on my voyage. This letter will reach England by a merchantman now on his homeward voyage from Archangel. More fortunate than I, who may not see my native land perhaps for many years. I am, however, in good spirits. My men are bold and apparently firm of purpose. Nor do the floating sheets of ice that continually pass us, indicating the dangers of the region towards which we are advancing, appear to dismay them. We have already reached a very high latitude, but it is the height of summer, and although not so warm as in England, the southern gales which blow us speedily towards those shores which I so ardently desire to attain breathe a degree of renovating warmth which I had not suspected. No incidents have hereto befallen us that would make a figure in a letter. One or two stiff gales and the springing of a leak are accidents which experienced navigators scarcely even remember to record, and I shall be well content if nothing worse happens during our voyage. Adieu, my dear Margaret. Be assured, for my own sake, as well as yours, I will not rashly encounter danger. I will be cool, persevering, and prudent. But success shall crown my endeavors. Wherefore not? Thus far I have gone, tracing a secure way over a pathless sea, the very stars themselves being witness and testimonies to my triumph. Why not still proceed over the untamed yet obedient element? What can stop the determined heart and resolved will of man? My swelling heart involuntarily pours itself out thus, but I must finish. Heaven bless my beloved sister, R.W. Letter number 4. To Mrs. Saville, England. So strange an accident has happened to us that I cannot forbear recording it, although it is very probable that you will see me before these papers can come to your possession. Last Monday, July 31st, we were nearly surrounded by ice, which closed in the ship on all sides, scarcely leaving her sea room in which to float. Our situation was somewhat dangerous, especially as we were compassed around by a very thick fog. We accordingly lay to, hoping that some change would take place in the atmosphere and weather. About 2 o'clock, the mist cleared way, and we beheld, stretched out in every direction, a vast and irregular plain of ice, which seemed to have no end. Some of my comrades groaned, and my own mind began to grow watchful with anxious thoughts, when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention, and diverted from our solicitude away from our own situation. We perceived a low carriage, fixed on a sleigh and drawn by dogs, pass on towards the north at the distance of about half a mile, and a being which had the shape of a man, but was apparently of gigantic stature, sitting in the sleigh and guiding the dogs. We watched the rapid progress of the traveler with our telescopes until he was lost amongst the distant inequalities of the ice. This appearance excited our unqualified wonder. We were, as we believed, many hundred miles away from any land, but this apparition seemed to denote that it was not in reality as distant as we had supposed. Shut in, however, by the ice, it was impossible to follow his track, which we had observed with the greatest of attention. About 2 hours after this occurrence, we heard the ground sea. And before nightfall, the ice broke and freed our ship. We, however, lay to until the morning, fearing to encounter in the dark those large, loose masses which float about after breaking up off the ice. I profited in this time by resting a few hours. In the morning, however, as soon as it was light, I went upon the deck, and I found all the sailors busy on one side of the vessel, apparently talking to someone in the sea. It was, in fact, a sleigh like the one we had seen before, which had drifted towards us in the night on a large fragment of ice. Only one dog remained alive, but there was a human being within it, whom the sailors were persuading to enter our vessel. He was not, as the other travelers seemed to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered island, but he was a European. When I appeared on the deck, the master said, "Here's our captain, and he will not allow you to perish on the open sea." Upon perceiving me, the stranger addressed me in English, although with a foreign accent. "Before I come on board your vessel," he said, "will you have the kindness to inform me whither you are bound?" You may conceive my astonishment on hearing such a question addressed to me from a man on the brink of destruction, and to whom I would have supposed that my vessel would have been a resource which he would not have exchanged for the most precious wealth the earth can afford. I replied, however, that we were on a voyage of discovery towards the northern pole. Upon hearing this, he appeared satisfied and consented to come on board. Good God, Margaret, if you had seen the man who thus capitulated for his safety, your surprise would have been boundless. His limbs were nearly frozen, his body dreadfully emaciated by fatigue and suffering. I never saw a man in so wretched a condition. We attempted to carry him into the cabin, but as soon as he had quitted the fresh air, he fainted. We accordingly brought him back to the deck and restored him to animation by rubbing him with brandy and forcing him to swallow a small quantity. As soon as he showed signs of life, we wrapped him up in blankets and placed him near the chimney of the kitchen stove. By slow degrees he recovered and ate a little soup, which restored him wonderfully. 2 days passed in this manner before he was able to speak, and I often feared that his sufferings had deprived him of understanding. When he had in some measure recovered, I removed him to my own cabin and attended on him as much as my duties would permit. I never saw a more interesting creature. His eyes have generally an expression of wildness and even madness, but there are moments when, if anyone performs an act of kindness towards him or does him the most trifling service, why, his whole countenance is lighted up, as it were, with a beam of benevolence and sweetness that I have never seen equaled. But he is generally melancholy and despairing, and sometimes he gnashes his teeth, as if impatient of the weight of woe that oppresses him. When my guest was a little recovered, I had great trouble to keep off the men who wished to ask him 1,000 questions, but I would not allow him to be tormented by their idle curiosity, not in a state of body and mind whose restoration evidently depended upon repose. Once, however, the lieutenant asked why he had come so far upon the ice in such a strange vehicle. The man's countenance instantly assumed an aspect of the deepest gloom, and he replied, "To seek the one who fled from me." "And did the man who you pursued travel in the same fashion?" asked the lieutenant. "Yes." "Then I fancy we have seen him, for the day before we picked you up, we saw some dogs drawing a sleigh with a man in it across the ice." This aroused the stranger's attention, and he asked a multitude of questions concerning the route which the Damon, as he called him, had pursued. Soon after, when he was alone with me, he said, "I have doubtless excited your curiosity, as well as that of these good people, but you are too considerate to make enquiries." "Certainly it would indeed be very impertinent and inhuman in me to trouble you with any inquisitiveness of mine," I replied. "And yet you rescued me from a strange and perilous situation, and have benevolently restored me to life." Soon after he said this, he inquired if I thought that the breaking up of the ice had destroyed the other sleigh. I replied that I could not answer with any degree of certainty, for the ice had not broken up until near midnight, and the traveler might have arrived at a place of safety before then, but I could not judge. From this time, a new spirit of life animated the decaying frame of the stranger. He manifested the greatest eagerness to be upon the deck to watch for the sleigh that had before appeared, but I have persuaded him to remain in the cabin, for he is far too weak to sustain the rawness of the atmosphere. I have promised that someone should watch for him and give instant notice if any new objects appear in sight. Such is my journal of what relates to this strange occurrence to the present day. The stranger has gradually improved in health, but is very silent, and he appears uneasy when anyone except myself enters the cabin, but his manners are so conciliating and gentle that the sailors are all interested in him, though they have had little communication with him. For my own part, I begin to love him as a brother, and his constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. He must have been a noble creature in his better days, being even now in wreck so attractive and amenable. I said in one of my letters, dear Margaret, that I should find no friend on the wide ocean, yet I have found a man who, before his spirit had been broken by misery, I should have been happy to have possessed as the brother of my heart. I shall continue my journal concerning the stranger at intervals, if I have any fresh incidents to report. August 13th. My affection for my guest increases every day. He excites at once my admiration and my pity to an astonishing degree. How can I see so noble a creature destroyed by misery without feeling the most poignant grief? He is so gentle, yet so wise. His mind is so cultivated, and when he speaks, although his words are culled with the choicest art, they flow with rapidity and unparalleled eloquence. He is now much recovered from his illness, and is continually on the deck, apparently watching for the sleigh that preceded his own. Yet, although unhappy, he is not so utterly occupied by his own misery, but that his interests and expresses deeply the projects of others. He has frequently conversed with me upon my own project, which I have communicated to him without any disguise. He entered attentively into all my arguments in favor of my eventual success, and into every minute detail of the measures I had taken to secure it. I was easily led by the sympathy which he evinced to use the language of my heart, and I gave utterance to the burning ardor of my soul, and to say, with all the fervor that warmed me, how gladly I would sacrifice my fortune, my existence, my every hope to the furtherance of this endeavor. One man's life or death were but a small price to pay for the acquirement of the knowledge which I sought. As I spoke, the dark gloom spread over our listener's countenance. At first I perceived that he tried to suppress his emotion. He placed his hands before his eyes, and my voice quivered and failed me as I beheld tears trickle between his fingers, and a groan burst from his heaving breast. I paused. At length he spoke in broken accents. Unhappy man, do you share my madness? Have you drunk also of that intoxicating draught? Hear me. Let me reveal my tale, and you will dash the cup from your lips. Such words, you may imagine, strongly excited my curiosity, but the paroxysm of grief that had seized the stranger overcame his weakness, and many hours of repose and tranquil conversations were necessary to restore his composure. Having conquered the violence of his feelings, he appeared to despise himself for being the slave of passion, and quelling the dark tyranny of despair, he led me again to converse concerning myself personally. He asked the history of my earlier years. The tale was quickly told, but it awakened various trains of reflection. I spoke of my desire of finding a friend, of my thirst for a more intimate sympathy with a fellow mind than I had ever been able to find. And I expressed my conviction that a man could boast of little happiness who did not boast of a friend. I agree with you, said the stranger. We are unfashioned creatures, not half made up, if one wiser, better, dearer than ourselves, such a friend ought to be, did not lend his aid, and perfectionate our own weak and faulty natures. I once had a friend, the most noble of human creatures, and am entitled, therefore, to judge respecting friendship. You have hope, and the world before you, and you have no cause for despair, but I've lost everything and cannot begin life anew." As he said this, his countenance became expressive of a calm, settled grief that touched me to the heart. But he was silent and presently retired to his cabin. Even broken in spirit as he is, no one can feel more deeply than he does the beauty of nature. The starry sky, the sea, and every sight afforded by these wonderful regions all seems to have the power of elevating his soul from the earth. Such a man has a double existence. He may suffer misery and be overwhelmed by disappointments, yet when he is retired into himself, he will be like a celestial spirit with a halo around him, within whose circle no grief or folly may venture. Will you smile at the enthusiasm I express concerning this divine wanderer? You would not if you saw him. You have been tutored and refined by books and retirements from the world, and you are therefore somewhat fastidious. But this only renders you more fit to appreciate the extraordinary merits of this wonderful man. Sometimes I have endeavored to discover what quality it is he possesses that elevates him so immeasurably above any other person I ever knew. I believe it to be an intuitive discernment, a quick but never failing power of judgment, a penetration into the causes of things unequaled for clearness and precision. It all adds to a facility of expression and a voice whose varied intonations are soul-subduing music. August 19th. Yesterday the stranger said to me, "You may easily perceive, Captain Walton, that I have suffered great and unparalleled misfortunes. I had determined, at one time, that the memory of these evils should die with me, but you have won me to alter my determination. You seek for knowledge and wisdom as I once did, and I ardently hope that the gratification of your wishes may not be a serpent's sting to you as mine has been. I do not know that the relation of my disaster will be useful to you, yet when I reflect that you are pursuing the same course, exposing yourself to the same dangers which have rendered me into what I am, I imagine that you may deduce an apt moral from my tale, one that may direct you, if you succeed in your undertaking, and one that may console you in case of failure. Prepare to hear of occurrences which are generally deemed marvelous. Where we, among the tamer scenes of nature, I would fear that you would not believe. Perhaps your ridicule, I would fear, but many things will appear possible in these wild, mysterious regions, which would provoke the laughter of those unacquainted with the ever varied powers of nature. Nor can I doubt that my tale conveys itself a series of internal evidence that will show the truth of the events of which it is composed. You may easily imagine that I was much gratified by this offered communication, yet I could not endure that he should renew his grief by a recital of misfortunes. I felt the greatest eagerness to hear the promised narrative, part from curiosity and partly from a strong desire to ameliorate his fate, if it were in my power at least. I expressed these feelings in my answer. "I thank you," he replied, "for your sympathy, but it is useless. My fate is nearly fulfilled. I wait for but one event, and then I shall repose in peace. I understand your feeling, he continued, perceiving that I was about to interrupt him. But you are mistaken, my friend, and if thus you will allow me to name you friend, nothing can alter my destiny. You listen to my history and will perceive how irrevocably it has been determined. He then told me that he would commence his narrative the next day whenever I was at leisure. This promise drew from me the warmest thanks. I have resolved every night when I am not imperatively occupied by my duties to record as nearly as possible in his own words all he relates during the day. If I should be engaged, I will at least make notes. This manuscript will doubtless afford you the greatest pleasure, but to me, who knew him, who will hear it from his own lips, with what interest and sympathy shall I read it in some future day. Even now, as I commence my task, his full-toned voice swells in my ears, his lustrous eyes dwell on me with melancholy sweetness. I see his thin hand raised in animation, while the lineaments of his face irradiated by the soul inside. Strange and harrowing must be his story, frightful the storm which embraced this gallant vessel on its course and wrecked it, but tomorrow we will find out. And that is where we are going to end it today, leaving us in exactly the same set of suspense that the captain is in. Ooh, I kind of like that. That was a good setup. Like, I like the way it's melding just as much of the atmosphere that I really enjoyed from Jekyll and Hyde with actual character building. Like, we don't know much about the captain, but we know, we know about his childhood. We know that he is mostly self-taught. And we don't know much about this man who is going to be telling us a tale, except he has been through something harrowing and something that pushed him up into the Arctic Circle almost to the point of starvation. All right. So far, I am really, really liking this book, and I hope you are enjoying it as well. I will see you tomorrow when we begin with The Traveler's Tale. Hit that thumbs up button on the way out if you don't mind. It does always make me smile, and I will see you tomorrow.